Hey there, and thanks so much for watching. My name is Oren Margolis. I am an MBA admissions consultant and the founder of Pinetree and Palm Consulting. And today I'm going to be talking on the topic of aligning career goals and MBA ambitions. And I am incredibly passionate about this topic because I think it's one of the most important things that you can do to either be a successful MBA applicant or if you're deciding whether to pursue an MBA in the first place. Really important to get your career goals and career ambitions in order before pulling that trigger and potentially wasting a lot of time, effort, energy, and money. So I really believe in this topic, and I'm excited that you're along for the ride to hear a bit more. We are an MBA admissions consulting firm that works primarily with folks applying to the top MBA programs across the country and across the world. And those include full-time, part-time, and executive MBA programs. We also work with folks applying to other grad programs like MPAs and MPPs. I have been in this field for quite a while. I served on the admissions committee full-time at NYU Stern before going off and accumulating some other experience in leadership and talent development. So I'm also a certified executive coach who works with a number of different leaders, folks that are growing into leadership roles, and also folks who are figuring out their career pathways, which really positions me well to be working with folks, not just applying to business school and hoping to get in, but for those really looking to get their ducks in a row before they decide to embark upon that journey. So really excited to be here with you and share some of my admissions expertise and link it through to the career story as well. Also worth noting, for those who are tuning into this video, please feel free to go over to my website and you can see the QR code on the bottom right. And please get in touch with me to claim a 30-minute review session, whether it's a profile review, an admissions consulting session, or a career advancement coaching session. Just by watching this video, you are entitled to some time. So please reach out, get in touch with me, and let me know that this is where you found me. So in this presentation, we're going to be covering some ground, but primarily, again, talking about career, everything related to career, and everything related especially to career clarity. We are going to talk a little bit about why it matters in the first place. I mean, so many people apply to business school not really knowing what they want to do and kind of make it up as they go along. I firmly believe that that is really ill-advised and that it just makes the whole process so much easier by having a target that you're looking to hit. It can also potentially save you a lot of headache if an MBA may not have been the right goal all along. We'll talk a little bit about determining the different types of ROI that an MBA can provide. A lot of people think of it just in terms of dollars and cents, but there are many, many more ways that individuals think about return on an MBA investment, whether it's experiential, whether it's skill building. And so we'll talk through that a bit. We'll talk a little bit about how goals should ideally shape an MBA strategy, and that includes picking which schools to apply to, picking what format MBA to apply to, whether it's a full-time program or a part-time program, and then thinking about how to essentially craft a compelling application that ties to those goals, and then maximizing your MBA experience once you actually get in the door, which is kind of the point of the whole thing anyway. Finally, we'll talk a little bit about strategies for thinking through career clarity a little bit more. So how do I, figure out what my roadmap actually is for my career? How do I figure out what drives me forward? How do I even know what the target should be to begin with? And so we'll talk a little bit about how to gain a little bit of clarity before embarking on the admissions process. So many people wonder why it's even important to gain clarity on your career goals in the first place before applying to business school or deciding to go to business school. Can I just kind of figure it out as I go along or use school as a way to discover what it is that I actually want to do? And while that's not impossible, it's totally doable to use business school to learn about different fields and functions and jobs and industries. I would argue that having that target in advance is really the rising tide that lifts all boats. And even if it's not just one target, having a set of targets is incredibly important to help kind of smooth the whole process along, both in the near term and in the medium term. So for example, maybe you think that you are dead set on, pivoting within tech to a different function, but realize as you're kind of spinning that out a little bit further, that you want to move from finance to an operational role, but actually you can have your eyes set further than tech, maybe you have your eyes set on a number of different industries and Fortune 500 companies a little bit more broadly. That can make a huge difference between what school you might be thinking of going to. So career goals are a huge input into different school and program selections that have real differences between them geographically, in terms of where they might have strength, in terms of post-MBA placement, in terms of what companies are coming on campus to recruit. Full-time and part-time and executive MBA also deliver extremely different career results. And so being able to ladder your goals up to what a school is good at or what a program promises is arguably a much better order of operations than the other way around. Once you've realized what it is that you want to do or what wheelhouse you want to be playing in, you'll be able to articulate that with confidence. So it's not just important to kind of pick something, but to have conviction in that thing that you're actually going after. It's the difference between, maybe going after a field or function that you might not actually know a lot about or be, kind of unsure about, versus you've done your due diligence, you understand why you want to go into a particular role, and you're able to actually articulate that very clearly, confidently, and compellingly in your application. And guess what? That's what admissions committees look for. They're looking for someone who has done their due diligence in understanding what their short-term, medium-term, and long-term career trajectories look like. You'll be asked to articulate it over and over and over again. And so doing that from a place of confidence and conviction is just so much better than doing it from a place of doubt or not being sure. It goes without saying, generally folks, by the time they are applying to MBAs, are not that far away from actually starting these programs. So before you know it, you're actually going to be turning around. And if you're in a full-time program, you're basically recruiting for an internship, which is a major input into your post-MBA full-time job, starting in August. So, it gives you some time to actually formulate a game plan for some very, very competitive and structured recruiting pathways before stepping foot in the door. It gives you the chance to develop that game plan before having to execute on it. And that's not just the case with full-time MBAs. It's also the case with part-time and executive MBAs as well. Finally, and this might be the most obvious, there are a lot of ways to progress in your career without getting an MBA. And if you're not really sure, you might be missing the vantage point that you can get what you're looking for without an MBA. Or, hey, I'm actually applying because of one thing, but I'm actually trying to solve for another thing. And so, by really taking the time to create a vision, inventory your values, inventory your goals, you will avoid stepping into some traps that tend to be more common than I would like to see in the MBA applicant population. So a couple of traps or risks that I see all the time from folks that are considering, thinking about, or on the way to applying to get an MBA are, number one, assuming that an MBA alone is kind of the magic bullet to figuring out your career path. And I put in quotes on this slide, it's the tail that's wagging the dog. It's you're going to kind of go to the best school you can first and then figuring out what it is that you want to do. While an MBA is really good for, widening your aperture and getting exposure to different fields and industries and types of people that you might not have come into contact with otherwise, a lot is expected of MBAs the second that they walk in the door. And so from a time management perspective, the strategy of figuring it out once you get there can be one that really, does not do you a service, especially if you are going to be executing on a recruitment strategy that is time sensitive, as many of them are. I also see folks that choose programs that are fundamentally misaligned with the goals that they have. So a lot of people have wonderful jobs, they're well compensated, they're pretty happy, and what they're really looking to do is grow within that career, especially when times might be economically volatile, the job market might be all over the place. It's not always the best decision to, leave a stable job for the uncertainty of a full-time MBA program. That same person might be better off enrolling in a strong part-time program while simultaneously growing their career, both formally and in terms of earnings, and not having to let go of it. Conversely, I see so many people that are looking to make a really big pivot and think that a part-time MBA is a way to do that. And it's not. That's not what a part-time MBA promises. Those folks are often, especially if their sights are set on banking or consulting or some of the other traditional full-time MBA pathways, those are folks that really are better off yielding to the promise of a full-time MBA, which is to get those very specific types of jobs. I see a lot of folks who kind of go into these programs paralyzed, or they're just not ready for the rigors of full-time MBA recruiting, as I've alluded to already. There are folks who, after all is said and done, realize, oh my gosh, I've wasted a lot of time, effort, energy, and money for an outcome that I probably could have gotten without that time, effort, energy, and money. So, by getting crisp on your goals in advance, you avoid the potential to be really disappointed and kind of screwed over when looking retroactively a couple of years in advance. Finally, another huge risk is folks that think, I'll figure it out once I get there. I'm just going to make something up in my application. And they are not able to come to the table with a clear-eyed articulation of what it is that they want to do because they don't know in the first place. Okay. So, the best way to put together a really strong, personalized admissions essay is to have done your due diligence, to have done your research, and to believe what it is that you're saying. That's when voice really comes through in a way that's compelling for what an admissions committee wants to hear. And so the folks that knowingly just kind of pick something or lie or exaggerate or stretch the truth, or really just haven't done their due diligence, admissions committee members read thousands of applications a year. They are very, very good at sniffing out the BS. And while you think that you might be the person who can circumvent that, the odds are pretty rare that you actually are, just speaking from experience. So it's not a secret that most MBA programs, especially full-time MBA programs, are asking the same sets of questions or very similar sets of questions to their respective applicant pools. And I found this slide just a smattering of essay questions from the 2024 to 2025 application cycle. And if you think I've copied and pasted the same thing over and over again, think again. These are actually all from different schools, smattering from Haas, Wharton, USC Marshall, Stanford, Columbia, and Texas McCombs, that are basically all asking the same flavor of, what are your goals? What are your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? Why are you getting an MBA and why now? So for folks who haven't really combed through the essay prompts of top MBA programs, you will be asked this at some point in the admissions process. And this is true for part-time programs as well. This is true for executive programs. You will be asked, why MBA? Why now? And what are your short-term and long-term career goals? And generally some variation of how will this school or school X help you achieve them. So, if you think that you can get through the process not having a clear articulation of all of those points, think again. You will have to answer this question over and over and over and over again once the time comes to actually write your applications. And so having that answer pre-formulated will do you all of the favors that I've talked about in past sections, but also will allow you to write a slam dunk answer to this question for all of the schools that you are applying to. So there are a couple of things that MBA programs actually sort of promise or put forward that they can or are able to provide, just like MBA seekers tend to bucket the things that they look to get out of an MBA into a couple of different categories. Hard and soft skill building for many people is sort of the most obvious one. So whether it's, putting some finance skills in your tool belt, thinking about marketing more strategically, thinking about leadership and people management, building a team. These are things that not everyone has had exposure to. And so gaining and widening someone's skill toolkit can be really, really invaluable for those that are looking to progress in their careers or pivot to a new one. Having an expanded network of peers and an alumni to pull from, both in the immediate term and also in the long term, is super important. So being able to pick up that phone and call a former classmate in order to ask for a connection later down the road, or pick their brain on a potential job opportunity, or even just learn a little bit more about their industry. This is something that MBAs are definitely known for, and not all networks are created equally. Some are definitely stronger than others, depending on school and program. MBAs also provide pretty specific opportunities for career growth. And that includes, pathways that are basically carved out dependent on the type of program and the school that you attend. Finally, it kind of goes without saying, the experience of getting an MBA is something that an MBA can provide. And that experience, sometimes includes moving to a new city. Sometimes it includes a lot of travel. Sometimes it includes, friends you would not have otherwise come across in your career, or even in your life. And so, there is an MBA experience that a lot of people are really looking to sink their teeth into. That said, there are a few different types of opportunities that only an MBA is really able to open the door to. So for post-MBA roles in investment banking, management consulting, CPG marketing, for example, an MBA is really the only way to get there, honestly. So, say you're an artist and you are looking to turn yourself into a management consultant, you can definitely try to do that on your own, but it's going to be, really an almost impossible battle to get there. A lot of other pivots that are, even closer are still really, really, really difficult to achieve without the machine that is full-time MBA recruiting. And so when thinking, am I aspiring to be a management consultant for a top management consulting firm, or do I want to pivot into investment banking? Those are kind of signals in your brain for why a full-time MBA could be a unique and specific opportunity to build that pathway for yourself. Finally, it goes without saying that the experience of getting an MBA is something that can only be achieved by getting one. Duh. I often, almost every day, hear people talking and debating about the ROI that an MBA can provide. And, I often take issue with that type of discussion because it tends to be really one note. Oftentimes, I see people talking about ROI in terms of dollars that they earn now, dollars that they might make immediately after an MBA, and that's where the conversation ends. The message that I'd like to deliver is that there are more than one way to think about ROI critically. And for you, that before and after monetary equation might be the only one or the most important one, and that's totally valid. But you might be someone that, is really looking to lean on the experience or on the network that you build as part of that ROI equation. It's a lot harder to put a dollar value on, but is every much as important and valid as the dollars and cents in the near term can be. So we think a lot, when going through the different types of ROI to consider, financial ROI is the most obvious. It can be a salary bump. It can be access to higher paying roles. It can also be the salary that you expect to earn, not just right after being in an MBA program, but over the course of your entire career. So, some folks might see a modest bump or even a modest step back right after completing a full-time MBA program, but put themselves on a trajectory to drastically accelerate their earnings. And that's a trade-off that's really important to understand and weigh. Salary is different than career. And so career ROI could look like making the move that you always wanted to, but was never possible. Opening yourself up to being in a bank after only working for, other types of institutions your whole career, cracking something that you have not been able to crack previously, but is, really what you see and envision your career to look like. Network ROI, so access to people who might shape that trajectory. And that also ties into the people that you want to be around, both personally and professionally, growing that and building that. There are a lot of ways to, kind of build and leverage a network while in an MBA program and afterwards. And then finally, experiential ROI. An MBA can provide experiences that you never would have thought of before. It can be, traveling to a different country for the first time. It can be exposing yourself to different, people that never would have crossed paths with you beforehand. It can be, just the, feeling or invigoration of being in a classroom and learning again. It can be having a life adventure or a reset if you haven't been happy with your career trajectory or other parts of your life to date. That equation looks really, really, really different for everyone. And so I highly encourage folks when thinking about ROI to really, individualize that discussion and avoid chasing someone else's version of what they're solving for in terms of ROI. Do you in this process and know that return can look so many different ways. You'd be surprised at the amount of people who, are starting to pursue an MBA pathway, but actually haven't taken the time to really wrap their head around and understand the differences between a full-time, a part-time, and an executive MBA. These are three, tied together programs. They're all MBAs at their core, but they're really, really different in terms of what they promise, what they offer, and who they're geared toward. A full-time MBA is typically kind of the hallmark program of any given business school, but it's really best for folks that have a pretty specific use case, which is to go from point A to point B in their career. It's generally to make a career pivot of some sort, and often a pretty big career pivot. So this is really the only time in a lot of people's career when you can sort of say, time out, take a pause, go in as one thing, and kind of come out as another thing. That's especially the case if you're looking to go into pathways like banking or consulting. These are programs that generally tout and put their recruiting support right out front and center. Their main promise is that you will be able to make a pretty significant pivot because of going to this MBA program. These are the types of programs that different companies flock to en masse specifically in order to recruit students to work for them in a post-MBA capacity. They tend to be super immersive. A lot of times they involve travel. They expect that you'll get involved in club, in different leadership types of positions, in extracurriculars. These are like all-in types of programs, with the trade-off being that they tend to be really expensive. And they also, by nature of what they are, force you to leave your job and, like not continue on with the career that you're currently on. So it's a calculated risk. Conversely, part-time programs are generally geared toward kind of the opposite. The kind of target student of someone for a part-time program is someone who has been making really good progress in their job. They're looking to turbocharge it a bit, maybe advance formally, maybe get a title bump, maybe make a really slight pivot within their industry or even within their company. But generally speaking, this is for people that are happy with the trajectory that they're on, but just want to turbocharge. These are programs that tend to be pretty local, so they serve a local audience. So geography often matters with part-time programs. The pro being, though, they're really flexible. They're specifically designed for people that are working in rigorous full-time jobs and are staying in those jobs. So you're not kind of inheriting a career gap by participating in a part-time program. There's an inherent flexibility on behalf of faculty members and program design itself that you're a busy working professional. The trade-off, though, is that these programs are, they're less immersive. They're kind of opt-in terms of the experiential piece. So a lot of them have really robust kind of extracurricular options and communities and clubs and all the things that you would find in a full-time program, but with varying levels of participation. And there's generally not a promise of formalized recruiting prospects. So, the promise of being recruited by Bain or McKinsey or BCG or, top banks is certainly not something that most part-time programs are willing to put front and center when they market to students. These are also programs that are generally slower to complete. Most folks complete them somewhere between like 2.5 and 6 years or so, depending on the program format. And some of them have really quite flexible formats, either at night, on the weekends, or some combination of both. An executive MBA, it is kind of a hodgepodge of the two in some ways, but, it has the word executive in it. So inherently, these are programs that are geared toward senior professionals in their field. Most folks going into an executive MBA have at least 10 years of experience, generally 15 plus. Most have reached a certain point in their career where they are kind of, leading a team or leading a group of people, or have significant managerial or scope responsibility at their job. And that being said, they want to go to business school, but they want to go to business school amongst their peers, not necessarily with a bunch of 25-year-olds, which is often how full-time MBAs look. To go into an executive MBA, you are really investing in skill building. You're investing in yourself as a future executive. So maybe you're just shy of C-level and want to get there. I know an MBA is one of the only ways that can happen. An executive MBA would certainly do that. You'll be among peers that are in a similar, kind of work situation to you. You're at the same time, just like a part-time MBA, there's no career gap. You stay in your job. These are generally programs for people that, again, are not looking to use MBA resources to make a career pivot. Although many students coming from executive programs do see career acceleration or even, slight functional industry pivots while in the program. The formats of executive MBA programs are generally geared, with busy working executives in mind, and tend to take place, either on the weekends, at nights, some combination thereof, or sometimes over long weekends or in kind of like sprint weeks, where you're on campus or in a certain geographic location the whole time. So 3 different programs, 3 fundamentally different promises that can meet 3 really different potential career goals and ideas of what any given student might want to get out of them. I want to do a quick deep dive on what's possible with a full-time MBA. A full-time MBA is a really, really unique type of moment in anyone's career, because I always say it's like the one time that you can basically call time out on a career that you've already got going, say, I'm out, go into essentially a machine and have this freak opportunity to come out the other way as another thing. And so for a lot of people, that is only possible because of the structured recruiting opportunities that an MBA says that it provides, and in fact, it does provide. And some of this is really beholden to the industries that like to recruit out of full-time MBA programs specifically. So this is basically a machine that's running and running every single year. And it's really, really important to understand the recruiting machine that is full-time MBA recruiting, because it's such an integral part of the full-time MBA experience. So basically every fall, or at least once throughout the year at a dedicated time, all of the major investment banks, management consulting firms, CPG marketing companies, and some big tech companies will descend on campus to recruit for specific post-MBA roles in a very specific way. There's a set time frame. Everyone's recruiting at the same time. Everyone's interviewing at the same time. Decisions are given out on generally the same day or same week. There are structured pathways for engaging with folks from those firms that are recruiting on campus. It is expected that you'll be dedicating a significant amount of time to this process, particularly if you're embarking in these specific industries. I like to kind of put up warning lights in bold and red saying that significant effort is required, but you are also in the middle of a machine that is specifically, essentially tailored, catered, and dedicated to this population. Now, it's certainly possible to go into a full-time MBA and look to do something other than these 3 or 4 things. So plenty of people go in looking to do real estate or another part of tech, entrepreneurship, strategy, like internal strategy, a number of other things. So these are not the only options. But generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, it is kind of reasonable and doable to pivot in 1 or 2 of 3 different ways, and that's industry, function, and geography. So let's say you are a marketing manager in tech and you're looking to pivot. It is reasonable that you could pivot to being in marketing in, let's say, financial services or doing CPG marketing, maybe in a different geography, but to become an investment banking function for an investment bank in a different country is a really, really big pivot, and not one that's necessarily realistic to make, even with all of the structure and resources and support that a full-time MBA offers. Is it possible? Sure. Is it likely? No, because your career up to this point does still count. It's not like an MBA gives you license to do anything. You need to get hired in part for your skill and also your background and your knowledge. So, nothing here is a given. Everything requires some work. But generally, if there's some degree of relatability between what you have done and what you want to do, some translatable skills, some translatable geography, translatable target population or stakeholder population that you work with, those will all make you more competitive for those super competitive roles that are targeted to MBA populations. Certain roles will require you to be more self-guided than others, generally the ones that are outside of these structured recruiting categories. But also there are some that haven't made it onto this slide that do recruit for MBAs, like leadership development programs that tend to be a little bit more specialized. It's also worth noting that there are some special considerations for international students, especially those that will require a work visa if they would like to stay in the US. That landscape is always shifting beneath our feet, and companies that are willing to sponsor a work visa in the US are certainly dwindling in size and by no means a given. So having a little bit of geographic flexibility, and honestly flexibility in each of these 3 areas, in industry, function, and geography, is generally a good idea to maximize success going into the full-time MBA recruiting process, which again is just really the heart of the full-time MBA experience, especially in year 1. Full-time, part-time, and executive MBA programs all have slightly different offerings and very different promises in many cases. However, people want to know if basically they're an outlier. And if they are the exception to the rule, they're the one that wants to make a really big pivot, but only wants to do a part-time MBA, or they're the ones who are really, really set in their career trajectory, but prefer to kind of take some time out to do a full-time MBA, even though they're not looking to make a big pivot. I'd say that, it's a worthwhile question to ask yourself, especially if you fit the profile of that person who is a part-time or executive MBA aspirant looking to make a really, really big career pivot. Is it possible? Absolutely. People do it all the time. So it's super possible to go into a part-time MBA program and through really, really robust networking, being extremely self-directed, and maybe even taking advantage of some of your school's recruiting opportunities geared toward full-time or even part-time MBA applicants, definitely possible to get a job that's totally different than the one that you're currently in. But the key here is that process generally involves you jumping through a number of different hoops, whether they're structural, time-bound hoops, attending things like coffee chats and recruiting events during the middle of the day, applying for jobs that are at the level and frankly expected of full-time MBA graduates to get. That might look like taking a step back, like a step down in compensation or a step back title-wise, because generally the only jobs being recruited for at full-time MBA programs are at a uniform title. So there's just much more of an individual burden to make career moves for yourself while in a part-time or executive MBA program. That being said, I've seen so many people go from job A to job B while enrolled in a non-full-time program, because this is also a moment in your life when you're surrounded by folks of, in different industries, functions, different career backgrounds than you normally would be. It means that you have access to all of the institutions that your peers and classmates work at. So you really do open up the door to an unparalleled level of networking and an unparalleled level of access to resources that weren't previously at your disposal. But in terms of being, kind of handed that job or walking into a machine, coming in as one thing and coming out of the other thing, that's really not how part-time and executive MBA programs are structured, and also not the promises that they make to their prospective students by and large. So at this point, we've talked a little bit about kind of the value of gaining career clarity before embarking upon the MBA journey. We talked a little bit about how to think about ROI, different types of ROI that an MBA can provide. And then we did a bit of a deep dive into really the different promises that different MBA types make to prospective students. And so now I'd like to take a moment to kind of throw it all together and do a little bit of work at the individual level on how to link all of these concepts. So my favorite question that I ask folks who are thinking about doing an MBA and don't quite know where to start is, what are you solving for? And the answer to this question is going to be totally different for everyone. And the answer is your primary input into the type of MBA program you apply to, the format, the schools that you select, and also like whether to do an MBA or not, even in the first place. So, one theme that we can talk about over and over again is the idea of a career pivot. Are you looking to make a really big career pivot, either by industry or by function? If the answer is yes, a full-time MBA can certainly be the way to get there, especially if you're looking to pivot into certain types of industries or functions. Career acceleration is another thing to think about. So if you are looking to turbocharge your career, like what does that look like? Is it money? Is it gain additional scope? Is it get a new title? Is it, go to the next level in your organization? And how is that best achieved through the structure of a full-time MBA, of a part-time MBA, or even with existing kind of resources and pathways that your current company or industry might provide? Same thing with network building. What do you want that to look like? Do you want to be surrounded by a group of peers who are also taking 2 years out of their careers to get a new job and go all in? Are you looking to be surrounded by other working professionals in their fields in your city? What types of people you want to surround yourself with is a really good input to the type of MBA you should get, and also whether you should get one at all. Geographically, like where is that network? What tier of student body is that network? Is this, kind of like a top tier program? Is that not necessary? Is geography more important than sort of pedigree of the student body that you're joining. Yeah, leads into street cred and pedigree. Thinking about how much you should solve for prestige in this process is very, very important. Some people pursue a full-time MBA specifically because they tend to be the anchor programs of their schools, and especially among MBA crowds, they tend to be the most prestigious degrees, and that's totally fine. For some people, they don't really care if they get, an MBA from UCLA Anderson. They couldn't care less if it says full-time or fully employed MBA right after. How short-term or long-term are you solving for? Are you really looking for the next best job that you can get, or is this a longer-term investment? If you have really hit a ceiling in your job and you are finding no way out and need kind of a magic ticket, a full-time MBA can make a ton of sense. So really thinking about time horizon and, investment. And finally, the experiential value. Do you really care about the students that you're interacting with, being part of clubs, doing, different trips, being really involved on campus? Or do you honestly not really care that much and you are there to get the piece of paper, accumulate some skills, and leave? Those are all really important inputs into, what type of program you choose to go after or not pursue at all. I believe deeply in the value of MBA education. I believe very deeply in the value of the degree. However, I do not believe that everyone needs to get an MBA. In fact, there are some really good reasons why an MBA does not make sense for a specific type of person. If you are considering whether to get an MBA and you realize that, say, an independent move is possible without the degree, or, maybe upskilling or networking on your own makes more sense, it might not make sense to lay out a whole bunch of money and remove yourself from the workforce in order to pursue what would be a fairly expensive and time-consuming degree. Similarly, if you're asking yourself, okay, what do I actually, want to do professionally 2 to 5 years from now? And you look at potential career pathways that an MBA can, set you up to succeed at. If there's a disconnect there, an MBA is probably not the best vehicle for you to experience career growth. Career growth can be experienced, in so many different ways and through so many different actions. Sometimes the timing just doesn't make sense, right? If you are at a certain stage in your career or stage in your life, if you are, have family obligations that are rearing their head, sometimes, pursuing something that is extremely time consuming and is a legitimate time investment just isn't in the cards. And finally, even if an MBA can get you where you want to go, but might not, give you the lift in salary that you're looking for. Maybe it will get you from one industry to another, but will really require you to take a step back in earnings or even in title. Sometimes the math just doesn't really line up. And there are either better pathways to pursue, either professionally or personally, or just not at all. An MBA is not the only way to progress in your career. And in fact, sometimes it really, does not make financial or logistical sense for everyone. So what are some strategies for building additional clarity around your career, especially if the idea of an MBA might be in the mix? Some of these things might seem a little bit basic, but some might be things that you actually just need to slow down and really think about critically before proceeding. So, truly understanding, okay, what is the world that I want to play in? What industries are on the table? What functions? What types of problems am I drawn to? Am I a quant? Am I a poet? Am I someone who's highly operational? Do I want to be around people? And this really relates back to personality, values, and skill sets. Thinking about what your next steps, and I'll also add what long-term plans could tangibly look like. So, if you are in role X, what are maybe 3 different role Ys that are of interest to me? And being able to state them clearly and explicitly. Same thing with long-term goals. So thinking, in 30 years, I want to leave my mark on X industry by being in this role. I want to be the CEO of a food company in order to help improve global health outcomes through our nutrition system, right? That is a long-term tangible goal that you can then work backwards from. Where am I right now? Where do I want to be? And then what are the steps that it takes to get there? Part of that equation is identifying different growth areas and skill gaps. So, doing exactly that. Where am I now in terms of skills? what skills and growth areas do I need to improve upon in order to both get the next job that I want and also, leave the mark that I want on the world or progress in my career long term the way that I, am hoping that things might transpire. Connecting your why with your next move is super important. So, going beyond, I want to be a management consultant or I want to be in internal strategy, but why? Like what's the reason there? And again, not being cynical about it, being really, really honest with yourself about the fact that I want to be a management consultant because I value high earnings for myself and for my family. That is a perfectly legitimate reason for a particular career goal. Or I want to be in marketing because I really care about the way brands resonate in the world. Or I want to be in a role that is highly social because that gives me the most life when I wake up every day. So not just saying what, not just the what, but also the why. And then finally, understanding how an MBA can serve as a vehicle to achieve all of the above. So I want to be in management consulting. And since I am currently a junior financial analyst, a full-time MBA is the only way right now to help me get there. So really doing that legwork of figuring out what it is that you want near term, long term, connecting it back to any gaps that you have, and then understanding, how or if an MBA plays a part in that whole equation. Now, what career clarity does not look like, especially when, after you've decided to attend an MBA program and apply, is, faking certainty to please admission. So saying, I kind of know I want to get an MBA. Let's just say I want to be a management consultant because I know that that's what I think they want here. It is also counterintuitively not picking one thing with certainty. I'll talk in a second about optionality, but it is totally fair game to envision the world in which you want to play, not necessarily just one specific role that is kind of get it or bust. Finally, again, it's not precluding yourself from changing your mind. It's saying right now, this is what my sights are fixed on. This is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm hoping to achieve. But, I can always change my mind. Things change, conditions change, that's totally fair game. You don't need to feel like you're pigeonholing yourself into something, but you do need to have confidence and conviction in, what you're arriving at or putting forward. So on the topic of optionality, this is a bit of a controversial idea, but I would put forward that having some optionality in the MBA admissions process and when figuring out your career goals overall is totally fine. So just because you have a couple of different ideas doesn't mean that you are forced to take them and doesn't mean that you have to have only one idea or else, you don't have any clarity on your career or you don't have a chance of getting into an MBA program. I really reject that idea. Schools certainly welcome interest that is evolving. So saying, I'm interested in the area of sustainability. I think it could look a couple of different ways. It could be an operations role in sustainability. It can be at a brand that is known for its sustainable practices, or it can be in sustainability consulting. Those are three different potential pathways in the same general wheelhouse. And, that's where there's room in business school to kind of figure it out, right? To pursue all of those opportunities in parallel and also assess, what companies are recruiting, what roles are actually available within that wheelhouse, and then targeting your recruitment strategy accordingly. I really like, to think about it as this paint swatch, to have kind of three extremely different paint swatches is pretty tricky. If you're like, I want to be in banking or consulting or sustainability, that's, a pretty wide net to cast. But if you're saying, I want to be in the family of sustainability, it's a little bit more well-reasoned, especially if there's a very clear why there. So there's a passion for sustainability or a background in sustainability or evidence of interest and kind of knowledge base in sustainability. So think about it as different shades of the same color on a swatch versus three distinctly different swatches. The former, great. The latter, more difficult. So again, this idea of total vagueness is not great. I want to go to an MBA program to learn about all of the different options ahead of me. It's just too nebulous especially for programs that expect you to have somewhat of a target that you're looking to hit. But, don't feel like you need to just pick one thing and stick with it for the sake of this process. A lot of people really struggle with the idea of building a sense of clarity around their career. Like, what is it that I actually want to strive for? And a lot of people really don't know where to start. And so I encourage folks to really look inward, do a lot of soul searching. This should be a values-based exercise, and also looking backwards. So looking at your career to date, looking at your schooling, what you've liked, what you haven't liked, and then again, like looking forward to wants, needs, and desires. So asking yourself questions like, what excites you most at work and in life? What are the patterns there? Is it being around people? Is it getting that raise? Is it getting to like dive into a really complicated spreadsheet? Think through some of the common patterns there and plan accordingly. How do you want to position yourself for medium and long-term success? Are there certain steps that you need to take in order to get to either of those things? Is it necessary to take a step back to take a step forward? All of those things are worth considering. What do you want and need to learn? So what gets you excited when you're in the classroom? Is it more analytically oriented concepts? Is it kind of social concepts? Is it leadership concepts? These can be really good clues about what types of roles to go for and how to build a meaningful career. So if you really don't like being in spreadsheets, for example, banking or consulting probably is not for you. This is a time to really get real about those wants, preferences, and desires. Get real with yourself and get real with others. What's missing now? Maybe you have a really good job, except you wish it was X. Fill in the blank of what that X is. And that, you might surprise yourself with what pops up. That X could be, I would be super happy if only I earned 25% more. Or I would be super happy if only I worked with people that I liked. Or I would be super happy if I was working on something that inspired me every day. Those are all things to follow. And understanding that generally it's great to have a wish list, but having everything on that wish list come true is not always possible. But really understanding what is the stack rank, what are the most important things, and then solving for that and working backwards. And then finally asking yourself the really big question of what would make the MBA worth it? You might surprise yourself with what you come up with. Let me provide kind of a sweeping generalization. I will put it to you that having defined and tailored career goals that you believe in and that you have conviction in, basically across the board leads to better outcomes and an overall better MBA admissions process and MBA outcomes. Knowing what you want to do and being crisp about it allows you to intentionally choose what schools you're applying to, where those schools are, where their strengths are, what student bodies are like at the schools, and really link those to what you want your outcomes to be in the first place. Knowing what you want to do also allows you to pick a program type intentionally. Do you want to do a full-time, a part-time, executive MBA, or online MBA? All of which have pretty different promises depending on, what you want your journey to look like and what goals you have for yourself in the process. When thinking about your career narrative overall and how you tell your story, how you answer the question, what are your short-term and long-term goals? Why do you want to get an MBA and why right now? Understanding where you've been, but also where you're going, and doing so from a place of truth and conviction will make that story flow out of you so much more naturally and make you both more believable and more compelling as an applicant. And that's really the essay content that you'll be asked for over and over and over again. Same thing goes for interview readiness. When you believe what you are going for, you can talk about it in a way that's much more compelling, much more honest, and relates to the interviewer in a way that's just much more sincere. And, those interviewers really, really, really are able to pick up on that, even those little nuances when, folks really don't believe what they're saying. And then finally, especially if you're going into a full-time program, but even for part-time and executive programs, going in with a sense of intentionality prepares you to be more successful when you're actually there. Recruiting starts soon. MBA programs are short. And so being able to hit the ground running, understanding why you're there, understanding what your plan and approach is for being there, understanding the landscape in which you'll be looking for a job, trying to achieve your career goals, and really tailoring an approach to that is kind of priceless and indispensable. I strongly believe that knowing where you want your career to go is truly the rising tide that lifts all boats in this process. Thank you so much for watching this video and engaging with this webinar. I hope it's been useful, and I hope it's opened your mind up to maybe a different way of thinking about the MBA admissions process and maybe even thinking about your own career as well. If either of those is true, or if you just liked what I had to say, please feel free to engage with me. I offer a comprehensive suite of MBA admissions consulting services. I also work with folks applying to other grad programs. I also work as a certified executive coach and as a career coach. And so for folks that might not necessarily be sold on getting an MBA, or who might just want to be working on the evolution of their own careers or figuring out where to take their careers, those are all things that I can help with and all things that I've worked with many folks on over the course of my own career in this work. So please scan the QR code below and reach out to engage with me for a free 30-minute profile review, an admissions consulting session, or a career advancement coaching session. And just mention that you came via this video. Thanks again so much for your time and for watching this video. Look forward to being in touch with you, and I wish you the best of luck as you traverse the MBA admissions process, your own careers, or wherever the road might take you. Thanks.